Welcome to the Further Light Podcast, presented by Wisconsin Freemasonry, helping you accomplish your Masonic goals through education and more light. And now, I present to you Brother Napoleon Sneed Janczak. A couple months ago, I was asked to speak at Reedsburg Shed Lodge about Freemasonry from the time of Brother George Washington until today. This is Brother Napoleon Sneed Janczak, and today I would like to share with you Freemasonry then and now from the time of Brother George Washington until today. The most visible symbol of our craft in the early American Republic to this very day, Freemasonry has evolved. It has endured storms of controversy, risen to the heights of influences, struggled through periods of decline, and adapted to the new realities of modern life. And if you get anything out of this podcast today, it's that the fraternity is a living entity and is always adjusted for what the times needed for sustainability and relevance. All of that without losing its core principles or traditions. The story of Masonry in America is in many ways the story of America itself. The struggle for liberty, the tension between tradition and progress, the rise of civil institutions, and the ongoing quest for meaning and brotherhood. We still have those very challenges today. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go briefly into the major eras of this Masonic journey. Freemasonry in the age of George Washington to today, the early 19th century, expansion and crisis. The mid to late 19th century, respectability and fraternalism. The 20th century, mass membership and, of course, its decline. The 21st century, a sense of renewal, challenges, and opportunities. So as we travel through these eras, I'd like you to not only listen with your minds, but reflect with your hearts. What lessons can we as Masons today draw from this legacy? How do we continue the work of our forebears while shaping Masonry for future generations? Or what I like to say, making Freemasonry and its old traditions relevant to the Masons of today. So let's start with the age of George Washington, 1732 through 1799. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia. George Washington was initiated into the mysteries of Freemasonry in 1752 at Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 in Virginia, which was then known as the Lodge of Fredericksburg because this predated any numbering system at that time. Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 is considered one of a few time immemorial lodges, meaning that the lodge cannot trace its opening authority to a charter or warrant from any Grand Lodge. It is theorized that the lodge may have been self-congregated by Masons who lived nearby, that it may have been formed by traveling military lodges attached to the British Army. Now, this kind of makes sense because Brother Washington was a young man of just 21 years old, still at the threshold of his career as a surveyor and soldier when becoming a Master Mason on August 4th of 1753. For Washington, as for many men of the Enlightenment era, Freemasonry represented a school of virtue. It was not only about ritual, but about shaping character, teaching men to live on the level with their fellows and to act by the plumb and to part upon the square. If you would, take a look at George Washington's 110 Rules of Civility and Behavior, where the main theme is every action done in company ought to be with some sign of respect. Now, he would later become Master of Alexandria Lodge No. 22, and throughout his public life, he remained proud of his membership. Take note from 1783 to 1802, as was common practice for many Masons lodges of the time, meetings were held in a rotating series of taverns and private homes around Alexandria. He wore Masonic regalia at Cornerstone Layings, corresponded with lodges, and accepted brethren at Mount Vernon. When he died in 1799, his funeral included Masonic rites witnessed by thousands. a visible reminder that the fraternity was part of the fabric of early society of the Republic. The second one, Masonry in the 18th century America. Masonry in Washington's day was small but prestigious. It was loaded with dignitaries, politicians, and businessmen, men of stature. Lodges were relatively few in numbers, scattered along the eastern seaboard. They drew leaders, thinkers, and men who were acting in civic life. It was an age in which ideas of liberty, reason, and natural rights resonated deeply. The craft reflected these Enlightenment ideals. Ritual emphasized mortality, fraternity, and the equality of men under the great architect of the universe. Brethren such as Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, and Paul Revere all stood as examples of Masonry's influence on public life. Later, of course, many governors and presidents would join the fraternity as well. But what about Masonry as a symbol? Masonic symbolism, the all-seeing eye or eye of providence, the unfinished pyramid with the Latin words above it, annui coeptis, he favors our undertakings, and below the dollar, Novus Ordo Seclorum, meaning a new order of the ages. The square and compasses became associated in the public mind with the virtues of republic government. While it is a misconception that Masons designed the Great Seal of the United States, the resonance of a Masonic imagery with national ideals was unmistakable. We definitely had an impact. Washington himself became the embodiment of Masonry's connection with the new nation, upright, moral, dedicated to duty, yet modest in personal ambition. The early 19th century, the expansion and crisis between 1800 and 1850 and the spread westward. After Washington's death, the United States entered a new century. As pioneers pushed westward, Masonry traveled with them. Lodges were chartered in frontier towns, often before churches or schools had been built. There is a Scottish Rite degree, the 19th degree to be exact, called Brothers of the Trail. And along this trail, there is a carvings by the stonecutters marking who was there and, of course, who was lost. And you can find this if you search out Register Cliff. The lodge became a place of stability, a hall where men could gather in fellowship, bound by ritual and reaffirm their moral obligations in an often chaotic frontier world. And then came the infamous Morgan Affair and the anti-Masonic movement. In 1826, a dramatic event shook the fraternity, the disappearance of William Morgan in upstate New York. Morgan, a disgruntled Mason, threatened to publish a book revealing the rituals of the craft. And there's some speculation on exactly what he was going to reveal, and after doing a symposium some time back, we had come to our own little conclusion that it may have been the Royal Arch that he might have been ready to expose. Because if you think about it, Freemasonry was exposed in the early 1700s, almost as if when it was mainstream and at a Grand Lodge, they were already spreading the secrets of what was happening in ritual. But anyways, I digress. Shortly after, he vanished. While the truth of his fate remains debated, was he murdered or did he slip away to Canada? The public perception was damning. Many believed that Masons had silenced him. The affair ignited the anti-Masonic movement, which became the first third political party in the United States. For nearly a decade, newspapers railed against the fraternity, accusing it of secret oaths, undue influence, and elitism. Lodges closed and membership plummeted. In New England and parts of New York, Masonry nearly disappeared. The crisis was perhaps the greatest test of Freemasonry in America. But it did, but there was a survival and a renewal. So by the 1840s, the storm subsided. The anti-Masonic party collapsed, absorbed into what would be the Whig Party. Gradually, Masons rebuilt their lodges. They did so not by secrecy, but by emphasizing public virtue, charity, morality, and civic contribution. Then there was the Baltimore Conventions of 1843 and 1847 to try and help standardize the ritual and strengthen its sense of national unity within the craft. In 1844, Wisconsin largely followed the recommendations of this convention. This period humbled us and taught us a lot of humility, and this began the period of being more open about our practices. The mid to late 19th century, respectability and fraternalism, what we would call the golden age of fraternalism. The decades following the Civil War ushered in what historians called the Golden Age. Between 1865 and 1900, hundreds of fraternal organizations flourished: the Odd Fellows, Knights of Pythias, Woodmen of the World, and many of the other animal lodges and clubs. Labor unions would become popular with the Industrial Revolution emerging, and Freemasonry would have some influence in this era as well. Yet among all those organizations, Freemasonry stood at the forefront. Lodges became pillars of community life. Knights Templars would walk in fashionable parades. The circus and healthcare, the Ringling Brothers, as you know, who were Masons in a lodge near Baraboo, Wisconsin. They were also members of the Scottish Rite Valley of Milwaukee before heading to Florida. And this leads me to the expansion of appendant bodies. The Scottish Rite and York Rite expanded significantly in this period, offering deeper layers of ritual, esoterics, and philosophy. The ancient Arabic order of nobles of the mystic shrine, the Shriners, was founded in 1870, that which added color, pageantry, and philanthropy to the family of Masonic organizations. These organizations latched on to healthcare-related endeavors, and this was historic from the ancient Stoled guilds who looked after the widows and orphans when sick or dead during the construction of the temples and cathedrals. These bodies gave members and more opportunities for fellowship, charity, and learning. And then, of course, there was philanthropy and civic engagement. And Masonic philanthropy grew homes for widows and orphans, relief funds for brethren in distress, and eventually hospitals and research. Masonry was visible in parades, cornerstone layings, and public ceremonies. The craft was respected, admired, and woven into the civic fabric of towns and cities across America. And now we're at the 20th century, where the membership grew to highest heights, and then there was, of course, a decline. The early 20th century boom. The first half of the 20th century saw Freemasonry at its zenith. After World War I, returning veterans sought fellowship and stability, more brotherhood. Many joined the craft. The same occurred after World War II. The one fact that remains is that after every major event, Freemasonry pulled new and more members. By the 1950s, American Masonry reached its peak, nearly 4 million members nationwide. Lodges were bustling, initiation rates were high, and Masons were highly visible in civic life. But what about the lodge? It slowly started to become a community hub. Lodge buildings often stood as the center of towns. They hosted not only Masonic meetings, but also dances, dinners, and community events. To be a Mason was to be part of the respectable, civic-minded middle class. In other words, gentlemen. Then things started to change a bit. There was a decline of the late 20th century. By the 1960s and 1970s, the cultural wind shifted. The counterculture challenged authority, secrecy, and tradition. Civic organizations across the board, Elks, Rotary, Lions, and Masons alike, saw declining membership, largely in part due to boomers rejecting institutional practices and wanting to be different than their parents. The pursuit of happiness became more about the individual. Divorce rates went up. Higher learning became the priority, and more women getting into the workforce meant less social need. To put it mildly, the younger boomer saw rituals and allegory as just silly and trifling and less meaningful. And I have to say, on a personal note, I tend to disagree. Life was getting faster, and I would say they simply did not want to spend that time. This trend continues even today, and we are doing our best to meet those challenges. By the 1980s and 1990s, Masonic membership had fallen by half. Many lodges struggled to pay bills or maintain large, aging buildings. The fraternity, once a mass movement, entered a time of contraction. We're lucky to get about 10% of our membership in the lodges, but there is some light to help us grow with quality young men. They are looking to cure loneliness again. And then here we are at the 21st century, where they're starting to see a renewal with some challenges, but also a great many opportunities. We're smaller, but more focused. Today, Freemasonry in America is far smaller than it was at mid-century, yet many argue it is healthier in spirit. Members who join today are often deeply committed, seeking meaning rather than mere social status. So there is a return to tradition and education. And many lodges now emphasize ritual excellence, historical study, and the contemplative aspects of our craft. Younger generations often searching for authenticity in a digital world are drawn to Masonry's timeless symbols and personal bonds. And now we're in the more philanthropical aspects of Masonry and putting it into action. Masonic charities remain robust. Shriners Hospital for Children, Scottish Rite clinics for speech, learning, and dyslexia centers, Templars and eye institutes, and countless local scholarships and relief funds. These stand as public testimonies of Masonry's enduring commitment to service. If the last pandemic taught us one thing, it was to adjust, adapt, and overcome, and that brings us to digital Masonry and global brotherhood. The internet has connected Masons across the world. Online lectures, digital archives, and even virtual lodge meetings emerged, especially during COVID-19 pandemic. Digital conferencing has its perks, organizing events, officer meetings, and learning from others worldwide. It was a form of traveling without leaving the comforts of your own home. Yet at its heart, Masonry remains what it has always been, men meeting together face-to-face in brotherhood. And here's some reflections, the continuity and the change. Looking back across these centuries, several themes emerge. Number one, adaptation. From Washington's time to today, Masonry has adapted to changing social realities without losing its landmarks. Number two, resilience. From the Morgan Affair to the membership declines of the late 20th century, the pandemic of 1918 and 2019, the craft has endured through these storms. And number three, service. Whether through charity, civic engagement, our jump bag programs, or quiet acts of brotherhood, Masonry has continually sought to serve. Wisconsin has been unique in leading the way with supporting our first responders. And of course, we have timeless values. The square and compasses, the level, and the plumb remain as relevant today as they were in the 18th century. Our ritual and our lessons that we teach are what distinguishes us from all other organizations. These ancient tools carry burden and abundance, but if applied with humble intent, we become better men, and by extension, everything around us will be better also. So as we start to wind this down, from small colonial lodges of George Washington's day through the trials of the 19th century to the mass membership of the 20th and the renewed focus of our own century, Freemasonry has walked alongside the American story. It has never been perfect. It has known periods of triumph and times of trial, but it has remained faithful to its mission, to make good men better, to cultivate virtue, and to bind others and other brothers together in the bonds of fellowship. Our task in this generation is simple. Just simply do the work. Carry the light of Freemasonry forward into the future. So may we, like Washington, like those who came before us, prove faithful to the trust committed to us. We are builders of men, of leaders, and we should strive to be good in the world so that our legacy can be enjoyed by future generations. That said, thank you for joining me, Brother Napoleon Sneed Janzak, and the entire Further Light team on your journey to find more light through Masonry. Are you interested in learning more about Freemasonry in Wisconsin? Visit wisconsinmasons.org to learn more about Masonry and access further educational content and more light. Once again, that address is wimasons.org. Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at education@wisconsinmasons.org. And thank you for listening.